Good afternoon. Why does it matter? February 2nd, 1959, when under the protection of 85 police officers, Ronald Deskins, raise your hand, Michael Jones, Lance Newman, and Gloria Thompson, who couldn't be here. They were seventh graders, like many of you that are here. They are our local heroes. They entered Stratford Junior High School, and today is an important day for Arlington, Virginia, and our nation. The inequities and the battle against segregated public education prior to the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus the board, was a long and arduous. The integration of Stratford Junior High School represented the end of massive resistance in Virginia. It was nationally significant as the first integrated public secondary school in Virginia. As Dr. Alfred Taylor, our community historian, who has researched Arlington African American community, reminds us, we have to understand where we are coming from so that we can appreciate where we are going. Today, we want to spend some time remembering those events and paying tribute to the heroes in our community who fought for change. So it is important for all of us that we keep Arlington history alive and to remember the tireless efforts and struggle made by many who came before us. Today, at this special event, we are joined by school board members. So we have here Nancy Van Doren. We also have Dr. Murphy, our superintendent, members of the executive leadership team, and we also have other elected leaders. I don't know if we have somebody else to here, but we also have our community advocates, like Sandra Green, here with us. Thank you, Sandra, for facilitating this process. And today, Virginia Senator Tim Kaine could not be with us today, but he has sent a short message for us. Let's listen to that now.
Hi, I'm Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia, and I am delighted to be able to send greetings and share some words on such a historic anniversary for our Commonwealth. On February 2nd, 1959, Stratford Junior High School, which is now the site of H.B. Woodlawn, became the first public school in Virginia to integrate, to allow students of all races to attend. Over the next few years, it ushered in a wave of desegregation amongst educational institutions in the state. Today, Virginia is stronger and more equal because of the leadership of H.B. Woodlawn and the students and faculty and parents. I'm reminded of the time when I was serving as governor, when I visited H.B. Woodlawn to commemorate the 50th anniversary of this day in 2009. My wife, Ann Holton, was with me that day, and her family played an important role in ending racial segregation in the Commonwealth schools. Ann's father, Linwood Holton, served as Virginia's governor from 1970 to 1974. Up to the time he was elected governor, the Virginia governors previous to him had fought to maintain segregation. There were certain enlightened outposts like Arlington and H.B. Woodlawn, but across the state, many jurisdictions wouldn't open their schools, and the weight of the governor's office was squarely behind segregation rather than integration. Well, Governor Holton had an opportunity in his first year in office to enroll his 4 children into public schools in Richmond that were majority African American schools. He did this to send a message that education was important and that kids of different skin colors could all sit and learn together. There's a historic photo of him walking my wife's sister, Taylo, into John F. Kennedy High School on the first day of school. It was a front page photo in the New York Times. There had been many photos in that era, the civil rights era, of Southern governors blocking the schoolhouse door and keeping African American kids from coming in. But as far as I know, there was only one photo of a governor hand in hand with his daughter with big smiles on their faces, walking into integrated schools to show that all kids were equal and that education was the most important value of our community. That was a great sign of courage during a time when school integration was being met with strong resistance in Virginia and elsewhere. As we celebrate the 57th anniversary of Virginia school integration today, February 2nd, and as we celebrate Black history over the next coming weeks, let's honor the trailblazers of our past. America has come a long way in its march toward a more equal society, and Virginia has too. But we've still got a lot more to do. And as we reflect on our past, let's remember that when we open the doors of opportunity and equality for all children, we build a stronger future for all America. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Senator Kaine. I also want to thank our organizing committee who has helped us organize this event, Connie Skelton, Sandra Green, Susan Cunningham, staff from HLRB, staff from School Community Relations, and many of the people who have really honored this history, and I want to expect that all of you will see the video, It's Just Me. It was produced by Arlington Public Schools. So we have this event, this celebration. This is sponsored by Arlington County Government, the Arlington Chapter on the NWCP, and the Black Heritage Museum of Arlington. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the moderator of today's event, Carmela Ham, formerly with Commonwealth Public Broadcasting, where she directed broadcasts of the Virginia State Senate, and the daughter of Dorothy Ham, a leader in the Arlington struggle to integrate its public schools. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay? There you go. I'd like to begin this afternoon with a question for Dr. Taylor. Dr. Taylor, what was school like for African American students in Arlington before desegregation occurred?
Well, I attended school long before desegregation. In fact, I attended Arlington schools until the 3rd grade. Then my parents transferred me to Washington, D.C. public schools, which I had to travel from the North area to Stevens Elementary School at 21st and K Street. From Stevens, I then attended Francis Junior High School at 24th and N Street, and then graduating from the Armstrong Technical High School. The reason that my parents made this decision, they were products of the Washington, D.C. schools. And at that time, if you worked for the federal government, your kids could go to D.C. schools without paying tuition. And the D.C. schools, not saying they were any better than the Arlington schools, it was the point that you had more choices because they had more schools that gave you a wider variety of choices to attend was the reason that my parents sent me to D.C. schools rather than to leave me in the Arlington County schools. So you can say the bottom line was not the quality of teachers because Arlington had very good teachers during that time, very good, dedicated, caring teachers, but it was the opportunity to give me more choices.
Okay, so during this time period, the public school system in Arlington went all the way through high school. You were able to graduate?
Yes, you went to, the school in my area was Kemper School for elementary, and you stayed there until 6th grade. The thing about it at that time was that in a classroom, you actually had 4 different levels of students that one teacher was expected to teach. Because you started school in September, you were in an A group. In January, another group came in and was considered a B group. Plus, you had the prior group. So it was possible that in a 3rd grade, you could have a 3A, 3B, 4A, 4B, taught by one teacher who had to teach 4 different levels of teachers, students who entered school at the same time. So talk about Montessori now with 3 different levels in the classroom. During those days, there were 4 different levels in one classroom, taught by one teacher without an aide.
Okay, thank you, sir. Michael Jones, I'd like to ask you and each of the students this question, if you don't mind beginning with your answer. Do you mind telling us what your first few months were like when you attended Stratford Junior High in February of 1959?
The good thing is that I don't remember that much about it, so it couldn't have been that bad. I just remember when we first got to school, we went to the principal's office, Mr. Richmond's office, and he gave us a little talk about what we could expect and how we may not make friends at first and things like that. And after that, we went to class. I was with Gloria, and Lance and Ronnie were in the same class together. And we went to class, and basically, I don't remember too much outside the ordinary in that first few months, just going up and down, just going to class, not making too many friends at that point, but just on the other hand, also not being hassled or anything like that, so nothing negative happened. It was just basically like a normal, as far as I can remember, just a normal class day, except that, you didn't have any other friends in the class, just me and Gloria. We interact a little with the other students, but not a whole lot than you would at a normal class where you didn't know too many people. But like I said, it wasn't negative. It was just a new student in a new school with people that you didn't know. Other than that, it was just basically just normal junior high school, as far as I can remember.
Did you realize at that time that what you were embarking upon was about to make history, not just for the county, but for the state of Virginia?
Well, prior to that time, we had been through quite a few training sessions where our community leaders and other leaders had told us what to expect. And we were some of the younger students. They were like high school students. We were just junior. We were only 12 years old at the time. So it's, I don't remember taking a whole lot in, but I do remember looking at the news to see what happened down in other states. But in as much as this is Arlington, and this is a different type of community than it was further down south, and I had interacted somewhat with the other people who lived out in Arlington doing things like trick-or-treating during those days, or sleigh riding with other kids in other neighborhoods. So I got along pretty well in that sense. So I didn't expect too much negative to happen, and it didn't. But as things went on, it wasn't too much out of the ordinary as I can remember those first few months.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Dr. Ware, I did not mean to skip over you, sir. Did you have any memories of the first day that the students attended school that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah. One was anxiety. We were asked to park in the lower lot so that the marshals and police people could use the little lot right out here. And I remember walking toward the building and seeing all these officers around the building. And I had these kinds of wonderments. One was, are we likely to have violence or riots? This, of course, was 1959. In 1957, President Eisenhower had to move federal troops into Little Rock, Arkansas, because of the riots that occurred around the integration of Central High School in Little Rock. So I had this level of anxiety as I walked into the building. I also remember what is going to be the reaction of some of my white students to these youngsters? Because as Senator Kaine pointed out, as many of you know, those were not necessarily times free of violence. So I had the concern that someone in the class might, in fact, cause a problem for me. Those basically were the anxieties associated with the first day of school.
Did you take notice of how integration affected your classroom, if at all, during this time?
Yeah. The first 2.5 periods, I had them the first period, Monday, Tuesday, then about the middle of the first period on Wednesday, things changed. The first 2 days, the atmosphere in the class was icy. I mean, stiff, formal. People spoke softly, students spoke softly. It was pretty stiff. Then sometime in the early part of the period on Wednesday, I asked a question, and I still remember the student who gave the response. Charles Allegrone gave a very amusing response to a question I'd asked, and the whole class laughed, including the teacher, and it broke the ice. And this still is a very emotional situation for me, and it's great to have the opportunity to see Lance and Ronnie again. It really changed the atmosphere in the whole class that mid-period Wednesday, and from then on, I think things went much more easily through the rest of the semester.
Did you notice after that point that pretty much towards the rest of the school year, things took a turn for the better with the acceptance of the students and the interaction between the students?
There were a couple of things that struck me personally. One, I used to take my planning period in the teacher's lounge, and there were members of the faculty who thought this was the worst thing that could have ever happened to mankind. And they talked about that in the lounge out of there. And I took the rest of my planning periods through the rest of the semester in the cafeteria. That certainly was one aspect of the reactions that I remember. Along about May, now, you all know where the cafeteria is on the second floor, and you know where the central stairway is, and you know where the principal's office was. Well, I had a 5th period general math class that met just this side of that central stairway. And during the change of classes in the end of the 3rd lunch period, there were hordes of students in the hall. And Mr. Richmond was out there, and one of my students, I remember her first name, fortunately not her last name, called out the principal with, "Mr. Richmond, you're a expletive, and if you'll pardon the use of the N-word, nigger lover." That indicated that the tension was still present in the school. But fortunately, I don't know how Ron and Mike and Lance felt, but fortunately, I never felt that tension within my classroom. But the tension persisted there, certainly through the spring, among some people.
Thank you. Lance, would you like to elaborate on your recollections of your first few days at Strafford?
If I can remember back that far. Let's see. Similar to Mike, a lot of similarities, Mike. I remember the first day they Mr. Jones, Mike's father, dropped us off at, was it on Old Dominion Drive? And we walked down the back of the school, the back long pathway by the football field, which I think officially was actually the front of the school then, because the flagpole was there, but the main entrance is there. But anyway, I remember walking down that pathway, and there were cops everywhere. And it was like, it was a long blue line, my gosh. And we walked into the entrance back here, and like Mike said, to Mr. Richmond's office, gave us an orientation. And then we were sent to Mr. Ware's class, right? You know, the first class, math, and you know, like I said, it was pretty quiet. I mean, pretty tense, but civil. And I remember, this is one thing I distinctly remember, the bell rang for the period change, and you know, you walk out of the classroom, and I see this horde of humanity, this horde of white humanity, I guess it was. and the school, we previously had been an HB, that's the all-black school in South Arlington, and it was not nearly that crowded, but I said, wow, this is something else. And I guess there was some stairs or whatever, but not much. And you know, so that just struck me, so I proceeded to the next second period class, and things went fairly well. And so, like I said, we were kind of prepped to maybe expect stairs or you know, maybe even violence, but none of that materialized. And I do remember that incident on Wednesday when Charles. I didn't remember, you know, I couldn't remember his name, but I became a friend with him for most of the, you know, for the 7th and 8th grade. Charles Allergon? Yeah, Allergon. Yeah, in fact, I met his father was a captain in the Navy. He worked at the Pentagon. And I remember the incident. I mean, remember that icebreaker on, I didn't know what day it was.
So it wasn't lying.
No. I can verify that. So that's pretty much it. The first couple days, and you know, I must admit the school year was the remaining of the school year was well, they had there are certain minor things, but nothing like Little Rock.
At age 12, did you realize the significance of what it was that you were doing?
Not really. No, I mean, I didn't realize, but you know, there was some anxiety on our part, you know, a little nervousness, but I think it took a toll on our parents and other people much more, because they, you know, I think they were really, especially my mom, and was really worried that, you know, something's going to happen. And I guess when you grow up and become a parent or something like that, then you realize, oh my, you know, your kids and stuff, you know, how anxious the time could be. But and later on, I realized, you know, the number of people, especially the parents and the community leaders, the sacrifices they made. We were just a part of it. I mean, you know, we were students, but we were just a minor, I wouldn't say minor part of it, but we were just a part of the whole process. And just, and we, you know, we performed our part, what we were supposed to do. Okay.
Yeah,
That's pretty much it.
I think everyone's
I'm rambling now.
everyone's parents prepared them well, and the community as a whole. Ronnie, I want to ask you the same questions, but before you elaborate on that, I'd like to start off with the famous newspaper story of your mother fixing you burnt toast for breakfast and sending you off to school. She told me one day that was not the case, but the toast was a little brown and she had to scrape it off, but the reporter blew it out of proportion and said she fed you burnt toast. Yeah.
Yeah, that, believe it or not, in fact, my brother and I, we used to tease my mother about that. We could do that, years later. 30 years later, we could still go, you're not burning that toast, are you? Because basically that first morning, we woke up and there was a reporter already at our house. I couldn't tell you exactly where he was from. Might have been the Sun or something like that. But anyhow, that reporter followed me around in the morning, watched me brush my teeth, watched me get dressed, do everything. And my parents were very gracious, and so, he was pretty much allowed access, and he was a very nice fellow. And, but my mother likes her toast really light. And now, actually, ironically, as an adult, I like things double toasted. I mean, if I order something, if I order a bagel, I want it double toasted before you put your cream cheese on it or anything like that. So, but she was just the opposite. She liked things light. Well, so the toast had got a little bit dark for her taste, and she was scraping it. And of course, he saw that. And so the headline of the article that he wrote, which I'm sure he intended it to be humorous, and it was humorous, and not to my mother, though. It said something to the effect of Ronnie overslept, ate burnt toast, and was off. And that was, my mother was completely undone with the fact that she thought that he was announcing to the world that she fed her children burnt toast. She was not a good mother, she was not a good homemaker or whatever. And so and like I say, for years after that, we could always bring a laugh or a chuckle, or go on, boy, when my brother and I would say, this toast looks a little burnt, or whatever. And like I say, even when I had kids of my own would come down for holiday dinners, sometimes we would bring that up, and she would just laugh and whatever. But it really bothered her at the time. That and the fact that also in the article that they said Peggy Deskins, 30, and went on. So 2 things in that article. She was feeding them burnt toast, and she was 30 years old. Yeah, oh yeah, actually that would be nowadays, because she was 18 when I was born, so I mean, she was a young mother, and one of the hot mothers, as a matter of fact, in the neighborhood, But I mean, all of my friends, they all had crushes on my mom. So, but at that time, she thought it was like she was 30. Why did they have to put that in there? So, but as far as my initial days in the school, that very first day was probably, I was the most nervous, no question about it. It was just such a big production. I look back on it and I realized the necessity for everything that we went through, but at the time we were just 12. I think we were pretty well grounded in as far as accepting things or being adaptable to new experiences. All of us were. But at the same time, yet again, we were still just 12. And so we started out the day with, like I say, the reporter, and then, we all went in one vehicle. The plan had been made between our parents that one would take us, someone else would pick us up. And so there was a lot of cooperation and organization that had gone on between our parents and other adults in the neighborhood. One thing I must say, we were always so very well supported by our community. And that just made a huge difference. I didn't really even think about it at that time, but when I look back on it, I realized just how much of a difference it made. We had absolute 100% support of our community. And so even if we had some, discomforting things happen to us here, we always knew that we were well loved, not only just at our homes, but in our entire community. And which our community was really great at that time. Everyone knew everyone, everyone had
usually a couple sets of grandparents and uncles and aunts and everything. So it was one of those type of communities where you could just run up and down the street. You could go into any house and everybody knew you. You could always get a meal, you know. And so we had a lot of support. But that day, we started out, the reporter, then we had a police procession down to the school, a caravan, police in the back of the car, police leading the car, and everybody else was in the school at the time when we got there. They, for security reasons, I look back on it, I'm sure, they felt it was best that no parents be allowed on the school grounds that day. They also had all of the other students were inside before we came. Like if the school started, say, at 8, we got here maybe at 8:10. And so we came down, and we were really the only ones walking other than police officers on the grounds. And we came into the school, and we went to the principal's office, and also I think Mr. Masakura, the counsel, was there. And we got our little orientation. They split us, and that was really good too. So that two of us we would always be in class with one of our, you know, longtime friends, you know, regardless. So Lance and I had classes together. Mike and Gloria had classes together, and then. You know, they took us to our class. Now, I'll tell you, when that door opened initially to go into that class, that was a pretty anxious time because all the other students were already in the class. Also added to the fact that we were coming in the middle of the semester, which was highly unusual. I'd never done that before. And so everyone else had already started. Even if it were everyone was of the same race, everyone would have already had chance to form, you know, friendship groups and et cetera, et cetera. And we were the new kids. And so we opened the door, and there's everyone sitting there, and we're walking in, and of course Mr. Ware was saying, yeah, come on in. But it was just quiet. Everyone's looking at you, and we were just 12. So yeah, it was a pretty nerve-wracking situation. But everything went well as a whole during that first year. And I'm glad he mentioned Charles Allegron, because he was one of the students. Obviously the school had made some preparation, and they had a couple of students, I guess, who had volunteered. They'd asked and got volunteers to kind of guide us around the school during those first few days. Show us where the next class was, where the cafeteria was, et cetera, et cetera. And Charles Allegron was one of those students. And I always look at it as he was one of those type of people who looks to embrace change. You know, most of us are hesitant about change, and it's just a natural thing. We kind of knee-jerk, you know, resist it a little bit. But there are some of us who look for, always anxious to meet new people, always anxious to, you know, do the new thing. And I think he was one of those persons. Yeah, and he was he was very much very helpful, and it really helped us out a great deal.
Thank goodness for he and other people like that outside of the community and within the school system that embraced everyone during this difficult time. We're getting short on time, so I wanted to ask everyone real quickly, if you don't mind giving a response to this. Why does the history of the integration of Stratford Junior High School still matter to our community today, and should it? Dr. Taylor, would you like to begin, please?
Well, I'm an advocate of a bird that's called a Sankofa bird. The Sankofa bird flies forward, but while looking backwards with an egg in its mouth. The egg represents the future, and the whole thing is you have to know where you're coming from and understand your past so you can appreciate where you are and how you got to the point you are today. So it's very important that we commemorate the anniversary of the integration of schools here in Arlington so that we'll have something to measure by. We are not there yet, but we can see how we have grown in the assimilation of different ethnic groups, different groups of students and things into one body. So it is very important that we keep the anniversary of the integration and always take pride in that we were the first in the Commonwealth to do something of this nature, and the easiness that it went over without the violence, a thing that took place in many school districts. So we have a lot to be proud of here in Arlington to show that we're a little different.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Ware, same question, please.
The Brown versus Board of Education was handed down by the Supreme Court in 1954. President Eisenhower had to send troops into Little Rock, Arkansas to make sure that the school integration occurred peacefully. That was 1957. It wasn't until 1963 that we had the March on Washington, and Martin Luther King's occurred peacefully. And I don't think we should discount the importance of having done this when the rest of the country was still just beginning to look at the issues associated with integrating schools.
Thank you, sir. Lance, same question. Why should the integration of Strafford be something of significance to be remembered?
Well, I think, see, I look out at this audience and I see, I see a diverse audience. I mean, demographics has changed across the country, has really changed. And it kind of started back in the 50s with the integration of, with school districts before us, with violence. But in Arlington, it went, for the most part, pretty smoothly, and it was a testimonial or testament to the community, our parents, and all the leaders to go forward and with this great journey. Now, like I said, things are better in some ways, and things are still the same, but we still have to work at it.
Thank you. I was just notified that we're running short on time, so I would like to open up questions to any people in the audience. Are there any questions? Can you come on down to the microphone, please?
Hi. I was wondering if you encountered stronger negative reactions from the teachers or the other students. Did you notice any difference in the way that they received you? Did the teachers react more negatively than the students, or vice versa?
Ronnie, would you like to?
Actually, I didn't really notice any sort of adverse thing with the teachers. And for the bulk of the students, I think the vast majority of the students were just somewhat indifferent. And I don't mean that they didn't care or anything like that, and maybe they had their little friendship groups that they were talking and whatever. But what I'm saying is they didn't try to interfere or to harass us in some ways. There were a few students during that first semester, and very few, because they were always the same students, and probably about 4 or 5. And it was a large junior high school, so 4 or 5 was very few, but it was always that same few that felt it was their duty to try to make our lives miserable by every time they saw us to make some, racial reference and you know, some negative comment. And but we had, as long as things remain just words, we just basically ignored it. We were, you know, my parents had always told me that, you know, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt you. And now I know that maybe that's not quite true, especially I guess in politics or something. But but basically we were taught that if somebody called you a name, that was their problem. They were ignorant. They were handicapped, you know, mentally. And so you feel sorry for them, if anything. And my father had always told me that, he said, if somebody, though, puts their hand on you, you have my permission to hurt them badly. So, and that was, now that wasn't quite according to the training that we got before we went, but that was my father, and that was that. So I knew he was behind me, so I knew that if it ever came down to anything, that whatever I did, my father would be behind me. So it was, you know, again, the teachers, I never saw anything with the teachers, but, and very few students.
Okay, Mr. Ware, I'm sorry, Dr. Ware, did you?
Ronnie went on to play football at W&L, so I guess he got to practice what his father told him.
Yes, I see that we have a couple of more questions.
Hi, Dr. Ware, what do you
Remember
the comment?
Oh, that broke the ice.
what Charlie did? No, to break the ice. Lance says he.
I can't remember what he said, but I know it was the class broke out in laughter, and it kind of broke down. You know, it was a seminal, it was a turning point. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
It's very good.
It points out a good lesson too, and that is that humor is often a very good icebreaker. And that was a lesson I was fortunate to learn in my first year of teaching.
Yes. I see we have another question, I believe.
So to all of you guys, how long did it take you to kind of break the ice with other students, and not just the ones that that you were close to when entering the school, but basically, was it a long time between the point of you getting there to you bonding with the other students and making a lot of friends, or was it pretty quick in that process?
Michael?
Let's see. You know, to be perfectly honest with you, we sort of didn't make friends with many, you know, students. We kind of, you know, we always had well, like any junior high school environment, you always have cliques or groups. There were a few, especially in the 8th grade, I met a guy, can't remember his first name, his last name was Ferguson. And we hung around together. And a couple of other friends, but no, you know, there was no, I mean, people weren't unfriendly, but I didn't become a part, you know, a part of the social fabric at the time, because, you know, this was 1959, 1960, so.
Okay, Ronnie, did you want to?
One thing that might help you understand how things were at that time, the school was integrated, of course, with just 4 of us. However, all school social activities were canceled. There were no school dances. There were no school, a lot of the activities where kids generally begin to mingle and form friendship groups, those activities were canceled in the schools in the state of Virginia because it was against the law, you know, and in the state, and it really wasn't that aspect of our education didn't change until really we were, I think, probably juniors in high school. Before there were, in other words, there were no integrated proms. There were no, there's just a number of social activities. And plus, we couldn't play sports.
Right.
It was illegal in the state of Virginia for blacks and whites to compete against one another in interscholastic sports. So we couldn't play for the school team. We couldn't, and a lot of those things that later you ended up bonding with people over, some of those things we were not able to do. That didn't change until we were in the 10th grade.
Thank you. I hate to interrupt, but we are running short on time. Do we have time for more questions, or do we need to wrap things up at this point? 2 more questions? Sir, with the Redskins hat on, go Skins.
What type of training and preparation did you go through before you went to the school?
Lance, you remember that.
Who, me? Let's see. Well, I guess we had so-called tutoring sessions. I remember at, was it Mr. Weston or something, those kids? Anyway, they tried to, well, we had this, the social aspects about how how to conduct yourself and everything. But I guess there was some concern about maybe academically we were a little bit behind the other students, and so there was some tutoring that went on. And then, but I do remember the first week of school, and in my GE class, general education class, we had, I think was Miss Bowman. Anyway, the first assignment was some. What was it? It was English grammar. You had to go home and write some sentences that illustrate the parts of speech, nouns, verbs, and stuff, and then the sentence structures, subject, predicate, and come back and read it. So I went home and I broke my butt trying to form the most eloquent sentences and structures that I could. Tennyson would be proud. And went back to school the next day, and kids started reading their sentences, and was something like, he hit the ball, and this and that, and I said, geez, these guys are just as dumb as I am. And so, but the point is, Mike and I discussed this, I think our elementary school teachers did a really good, they were all black, because at the time it was, elementary school. They did a tremendous job in preparing and educating our kids in our community. So I like to give kudos to them.
Yeah, definitely. We have time for one more question, please.
Since you were technically the first people to integrate, did you ever meet any governors, senators, or famous people?
Michael?
We were fortunate one time. We went down to Hampton University, and Jackie Robinson was there. So we met Jackie Robinson, and I don't remember we got pictures with them, got autographs, so we did meet Jackie Robinson. And that was probably the highlight of this for me, just meeting him. It was a little bit before. I think it was probably this is probably the summer before we actually entered, but it was a part of the process, and all 4 of us went down to Hampton. And that was the best thing about it for me, meeting him at the time, and because he was famous, and I think I still got an autograph of him. But other than the governors and like that, I don't remember meeting them until later.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. Was there anyone here that would like to have a word, please?
Yeah. I think if we could just give a warm welcome and thank you to our guests. I would just like to personally thank Ms. Ham and the rest of our panel who have all taken their time to come and share their story here with us. And I think we're fortunate to be in this building now where we get these special opportunities to learn this history firsthand. And I just, can't thank you enough for taking the time and preparing. And I know as a school community, we really appreciate everything you've done and everything that our school board and the county board and our other members of the school community have done to put this event together. So let's give our guests one more round of applause. Thank you very much for coming. Okay, and we are going to head to E Block. Thank you for being a great audience.